The marijuana agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching. The marijuana agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy. You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com. The marijuana agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer. The Marijuana Agenda, Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaolin Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. The wasn't for these blasted kids and their dog.
marijuana agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
The days are over. The work is done. We're leaving on vacation, and we're never, ever coming back.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja.
We love the herb.
It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the Marijuana Agenda. Today on the show, we'll be getting straight to your cannabis headline news right after the first break with an update on what's happening with Washington, D.C.'s plans to legalize taxing and regulating marijuana. Coming up in the Cannabis Minority Report today, we've actually got two editions of the Minority Report. In the first half hour, we'll hear from Deborah Small and her talk on addiction for profit and how that ties into the Black Lives Matter movement and mass incarceration. We'll also hear from CNN commentator Mark Lamont Hill, who headed up a panel on prison reform. Both of these took place at the Not One Step Back strategy seminar that was put on by Drug Policy Alliance on April 22nd in Atlanta, Georgia. Also, we'll have some drug war data mining on the National District Attorneys Association and a radical rant on the latest madness about alcohol and marijuana. That's all coming up today in the first hour of the Marijuana Agenda. Those of you watching and listening live, you can stay tuned for Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio, where we'll cover more of the latest stories in marijuana and take your calls at 650-LEGAL-MJ. We got to take a break, and we're back with the Cannabis Headline News right after this.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb and licensed by the City of Portland.
It's time for cannabis facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the pharmaceutical agenda, without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain,
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Cannabis Minority Report from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority Founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at MarijuanaMoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, May 3rd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. MassRoots is reporting that lawmakers in Congress are moving to further crack down on Washington, D.C.'s ability to spend its own money to legalize and regulate marijuana sales. Low-level possession and cultivation of cannabis is already legal in the nation's capital under a ballot measure that District of Columbia voters overwhelmingly approved in 2014. But the city has been stymied from moving ahead to legally regulate and tax the marijuana market under a series of annual congressional riders enacted in recent years. Known as the Harris Amendment, after its sponsor, Congressman Andy Harris, a Republican of Maryland, the rider contains two parts. One provision mandating that the city can't spend any federal funds on legalization, and a second that strips it of the power to spend its own locally raised money on ending prohibition. But under the new funding legislation, the scope of the ban would be even further expanded. The key difference is that while the former version only barred the district from spending money allocated in a given year's specific funding bill on legalization, the new version prevents the spending of any money to regulate marijuana. The Vermont House of Representatives approved by a vote of 74 to 68 a non-commercial marijuana legalization bill that removes penalties for low-level possession and home cultivation. The vote took place after a late-night session and 5 hours of heated debate. The action was second reading, and third reading is expected on Wednesday. The body defeated an amendment to expand the bill by adding legal and taxed sales. It also moved to delay consideration of a separate Senate-passed legislation to allow legal marijuana commerce by one legislative day. However, it is likely that the vote will not be taken up by the Senate until January. The bill passed by the House would eliminate Vermont's civil penalty for possessing 1 ounce or less of marijuana, and it would eliminate penalties for possession of up to 2 mature marijuana plants and up to 4 immature marijuana plants. Lawmakers in Hawaii gave final approval to bills to change use of the word marijuana to cannabis in statutes and to add new medical cannabis qualifying conditions to include rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, epilepsy, and multiple sclerosis. The bills would also increase the number of marijuana plants that a qualified patient and primary caregiver may jointly possess from 7 to 10 plants at any stage of growth. It would grant patients and caregivers access to laboratory testing for their medical marijuana, and it authorizes the Department of Health to permit additional retail dispensing locations and cultivation of additional plants for dispensary licensees. Oregonians who'd hoped for an end to workplace marijuana testing are out of luck. Employers may still require their workers to pass a drug test after a bill that would have banned the practice hit a dead end in the state Senate. Although Senate Bill 301 survived a crucial April 18th deadline for lawmakers to vote it out of committee, backers now acknowledge they lack support to bring it up for a vote in the full Senate. Supporters said the bill was necessary to fix a discrepancy. Employers can still make passing a cannabis test a condition of employment 2 years after the state legalized recreational pot and nearly 2 decades after Oregon legalized its medical marijuana program. Before the bill died, legislators added an amendment that would have narrowed it to protect only medical marijuana users. Yesterday, Uruguayan adults interested in legally purchasing cannabis for non-medical uses began registering to do so at post offices around the country. The law allows Uruguayan adults 18 years and older and foreign residents, but not tourists, to legally obtain cannabis in one of 3 ways: home growing, cannabis clubs, and commercial sales. These are mutually exclusive, meaning those interested can only sign up to access cannabis from one method at a time. In the months since the first home-growing licenses were issued in August 2014, the law's regulatory authority, the Institute for the Regulation and Control of Cannabis, has registered over 6,600 households to legally grow cannabis. The law allows each registered household to possess up to 6 flowering plants at any given time, with the understanding that their annual yield should not exceed 480 grams. The first cannabis clubs were registered in October 2014, and the number of legal cannabis clubs has now grown to 51. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, May 3rd, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Cannabis Q&A with Dr. Mitch Earleywine from the Burning Issues podcast on CannabisRadio.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is the Cannabis Minority Report, brought to you by the Minority Cannabis Business Association at minoritycannabis.org. The war on drugs has been called the new Jim Crow, for how it disproportionately polices and incarcerates people of color. As marijuana legalization proceeds, institutional barriers still prevent minorities from fully participating in the new industry. Today, we take a deeper look at these issues in the Cannabis Minority Report.
Throughout my talk this morning, I'm going to make references to the art and to film for the points that I want to make, because so much of how we've expressed ourselves to the world, to America, has been through the artistic expression. So one of my favorite films is Daughters of the Dust. And the thing for me about that film that just sticks with me is the grandmother who talks about how important it is for us to recall, recollect, and remember who we are. Because the reality for me is that we cannot move forward unless we remember our past and carry it with us and use it to discern our present and create our future. So looking back to the place that we've come and to where we are now, I think it's really important for us to think about, why is it that black people are in America? Why are we in this country? Why were we brought here? We didn't choose it. We didn't volunteer. We didn't sign a contract and said we want to come over here and work for y'all for 7 years. Why are we here? We're here because this is a country that built their economy on promoting addiction for profit. We don't talk about that when we talk about what America is, but let's think about it. The first crops that created the engine for this economy were tobacco, sugar, and rum. All addictive drugs for which there was not a market. Our enslavement was designed to facilitate that market. We were brought here to be beasts of burdens, to produce a market for addiction for profit. Why is that important in terms of talking about the drug war? Because there is something to me absolutely perverse for a group of people who had everything taken from them in order to support someone else promoting addiction, now accepting being punished, locked up, and having everything taken away from them again for addiction. Like, really, to think about it. Like, what does that mean? And how is it that we accept that as a reasonable frame for punishment? To say that drugs are so bad that they justify the things that we do to people. because they used those particular drugs. Not even the most harmful ones, not even the most addictive ones, not even the ones that are guaranteed to cause death if you use them, like tobacco. Not even the ones that are frying our brains every day, like sugar. Okay? Which to me is the most addictive, harmful drug that people don't even relate to as a drug. So why is it that we have a whole system that's based on locking people up for their relationship with a plant? And why is it that as a community we've been willing to accept that for so many years? So for me, I'm going to refer to another film, which I thought was brilliant in illustrating some of these points, which is 12 Years a Slave. And I want to refer to it for two things. First of all, I want to refer to it for taking away the romanticized notion that people have about what slavery was and slavery is. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper than my man did in 12 Years a Slave, because he put that in the past. And I'm going to bring it to the present. And I'm going to remind you all about that case in Cleveland a few years ago when they found those 3 women who had been locked up and held for 10 years. So I want you to think about it. Each one of those women was kidnapped off the street, taken into a home and put in chains, literally prevented from being able to wash, eat, or do anything other than what their captor wanted them to do. They were used physically, beaten, violated, raped repeatedly, beaten, forced to do all kinds of things for a period of more than 10 years. And when people found out about it, they were like, oh my God, that's horrendous, that's horrible. And the man had to keep that hidden because now it's against the law. But for more than 300 years in this country, all of that was legal. All of it was legal. Kidnapping people, keeping them in chains, as a woman, using us as sex slaves, forcing us to produce children that we didn't want, and then taking them away and selling them to someone else. All of that was legal. So 300 years ago, that Cleveland guy didn't have to worry about keeping that secret. He could go through the world and let people know what he was doing and be affirmed for that. So I want us to really think about what the history of this place is and what it was built on. It was built on torture. It was built on enslavement. It was built on the exploitation of human and physical resources in order to profit a few. Now, to me, about what's interesting about being in Georgia is that many people, including people here, forget that this state started as a penal colony. It started as a place where the English dumped the folks that they didn't want from home. It was too expensive to lock them up, and they needed bodies to work. So this is the place where they sent their criminals. And this is the thing that began to build the economy here. So is it surprising at all that a state that started as a penal colony still has an attachment to punishment, still has an attachment to criminalization, still likes to make money from locking people up, still thinks of people as refuse to be gotten rid of, disposable, something that we're not willing to invest in? Started with black people, but doesn't end there. Because for me, the ugly truth about the South in general is that it's a region that's willing to hold everybody down in order to keep black people from rising up. It's willing to keep the majority of its people ignorant and uneducated in order to prevent black people from being educated. Think about that. You have a whole region of states of people who literally believe that their success can only be accomplished by keeping their foot on your neck. And so this is the thing that, the 2 points I want to leave people with. First and foremost, the other part of 12 Years a Slave to me that's relevant for black people is that he did a really good job of illustrating who we are vis-a-vis punishment. That scene where Solomon was kind of hanging, they wanted to lynch him, but they couldn't, and so he was literally hanging barely by a rope for hours. And eventually, all the other people on the plantation came out of their homes and went on about their business as if he wasn't there. And for me, that was such a perfect illustration of who we be. Seeing suffering in our community every day, seeing people near death every day, and walking away and not looking at it because we don't believe that we can actually do anything about it. And that's a conditioning. That's part of our legacy of enslavement. I want to ask this question. I want people to ask themselves this question. Does racial oppression require cooperation across color lines? Like, it's easy on one level for us to talk about what white people have done to us, but it's harder for us to acknowledge the ways in which we've supported that and facilitated that and allowed that to continue. And so my bottom line is, as long as we are attached to punishment, as long as we believe it works, the system will continue to deliver it to us. As long as we believe that there's a certain percentage of our community that's criminals, that we need to be protected from, the system will keep coming for them and taking them away. And the truth is that they keep coming for them younger and younger. So what is that really about? And I want to leave you all with this one metaphor that comes from another film, but one you guys probably haven't seen. It's a documentary called Lodge Ghetto, and it's about what happened to the Jewish community in Krakow during the Nazi occupation. And to me, it's really important because our history as oppressed people is very similar to the history of the Jewish people, who were identified as a race, regardless of what they looked like, who were oppressed and stigmatized as a race. And yet in America, when we see Nazi propaganda films talking about Jews in the ghetto and their living conditions, etc., we see that for what it is, propaganda. But when we see the same films made about black people in our community who suffered the exact same conditions of being ghettoized, stripped of their citizenship, driven out of their occupations, not allowed to get jobs, etc., we don't see that as the consequence of government policy. We see that as something wrong with them. There's something about black culture. Like, so what is that about? So this is the thing for me, and this is the parallel I want to make to that, which is that the community there really believed that their survival was dependent on cooperating with the Germans because they were under their control. And so they did all the things they were asked to do. They built schools, factories, they found jobs for people, etc. But what they didn't recognize was that they were faced with people who actually just wanted their extermination. And so at a certain point, the Germans came to the head rabbi and said, you have to deliver 20,000 people. We want all the children under 10 and all the adults over 60. And at this point, it was impossible for people to pretend that they were going to be delivered for anything other than liquidation, because these weren't people who were capable of working. And so the leader went before the community with tears and basically said, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I can't believe it, but send me your children. Send me your elderly. Better that we sacrifice this 20,000 and preserve the other 200,000 that are living in the ghetto. And so that's what people did. But what they failed to recognize, and this is said with no blame because I'm not sure that any of us would have recognized it in the same circumstance, but what they failed to recognize was that they were being tested. The Germans wanted to see if they would protect anybody. And the message is that once you are willing to sacrifice your most vulnerable people, then that means that you won't protect anyone.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for cannabis facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cannabis Sports Medicine from the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
The National District Attorneys Association has released a position paper on marijuana that states federal drug enforcement policy regarding marijuana should be applied consistently across the nation to maintain the respect for the rule of law. Well, that's not really a surprise. Did we expect the prosecutors of America to not endorse not enforcing the federal laws? That's kind of their job. But the surprise here is how the prosecutors have made their case for their position. One concern they have about legalization is the fear of stoned mayhem on the freeways, or SMOF, as I like to call it. They write, quote, "Since a majority of states have legalized marijuana for medical and or recreational use, marijuana-impaired driving cases will continue to present unique challenges for prosecutors," end quote. Well, why since legalization? Legalization doesn't invent stoned drivers. Cars and weed have been around since the beginning of the 20th century. As the NDAA explains, quote, "A driver who exhibits clues of impairment, along with evidence of marijuana, could be successfully prosecuted for impaired driving," end quote. Well, that doesn't change when the possession of marijuana is legal. Now, to their credit, NDAA makes it clear that testing for marijuana and metabolites in blood and urine is a fool's errand, stating, quote, "Scientific studies have not yet demonstrated support for marijuana per se levels similar to alcohol," end quote. But the district attorneys flop when they state that, quote, "Marijuana use has been shown to increase crash risk," end quote. For years now, prohibitionists have relied on a meta-analysis published in the British Medical Journal in 2014 purporting a doubling of crash risk in drivers who test positive for marijuana. The problem with that statistic is it did not correct for age and gender. Ask any car insurer and they'll tell you that male drivers aged 19 to 24 are the worst drivers. Guess who consumes the most marijuana most often in America? Over 1 in 5 people aged 19 to 23 consume marijuana monthly, And at age 24, it's at 18.1%. There is no other age that breaks the 20% rate. And overall, over 1 in 10 men toke monthly, but just 1 in 16 women do. Even the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration found recently that, quote, better controlled studies have found no or lower elevated crash risk estimates, end quote. Another concern for the National District Attorneys Association is the tried and true, what about the children?
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Or as I like to call it, WOTC. They write, quote, legalization of marijuana clearly sends a message to youth that marijuana is not dangerous and increases youth access to marijuana, end quote. Oh, really? Because according to the statistics, if the youth are getting any message about legal weed, it seems to be business as usual. Washington State says, quote, rates of teen marijuana use have remained steady despite the changing landscape, end quote. Colorado says, quote, youth marijuana use remains relatively unchanged, end quote. Oregon says, quote, recent trends in youth use have been stable, end quote. Teens also aren't finding greater access to marijuana. Since 1975, the Monitoring the Future survey has asked 12th graders how difficult it would be to score some pot. The rate of teens responding easy or fairly easy had been as high as 90% and never dipped below 80% until the year after 4 states had legal marijuana. Folks, this is just common sense. Teens' access to weed isn't through the stores. It's through the guy who deals in the parking lot behind shop class. It's older folks like me who gain increased access through legalization, as evidenced by senior use increasing by over half since legalization. The rest of their position paper touches on the hoary marijuana scares like the gateway theory, debunked since 1999, that pot causes IQ loss, that's been debunked by studying twins, one who smokes, one who doesn't. That weed leads to dropout, unemployment, welfare, and dissatisfaction. Funny how a criminal record can do that. And legal pot has increased poison control calls, since people can be honest now about what made them or their kid or their dog sick. Even though such poison control calls are down in Colorado, following a public education campaign on marijuana edibles. The National District Attorneys Association is willing to promote every reefer madness talking point available to help obfuscate a truth that is becoming clearer every day. This nation has a mass incarceration problem, largely fueled by the unchecked power of these same district attorneys to prosecute drug possession. In his new book, Locked In, criminologist and law professor John Pfaff notes that between 2000 and 2014, our prison population only increased by 100,000. But 9.6 million new prisoners were minted. It's not the long-term violent offenders that are the problem. It's the short-term, non-violent offenders who shuffle in and shuffle out of the system, permanently marked as criminals for the next employment, educational aid, or housing application. It's those offenders, largely drug possessors, that make up the bulk of the district attorney's workload. Research shows that 95% of all criminal cases are resolved with guilty plea bargains. Prosecutors since 1994 increased felony charges by almost 40%, even as crime and arrests fell. Prosecutors pile on those felony charges like stacking chips at the poker table, so that when it comes time for that plea deal, they have the upper hand. Despite the falling crime rates, the number of prosecutors increased by half, even as they maintained virtually the same rate of prison admissions per prosecutor between 23 and 25. If marijuana is legalized and federal enforcement is waived, then how will these over 30,000 district attorneys pile on the extra charges of possession with intent to deliver, conspiracy to traffic controlled substances, use of a firearm in the commission of a felony, felony child endangerment, use of a communications facility to commit a felony, and whatever else other scary charges they need to convince a cannabis consumer to plead guilty to a simple possession charge to avoid a trial in front of an increasingly marijuana-friendly jury pool? The next time the National District Attorneys Association wants to write up a position paper on marijuana, rather than copying prohibitionist group Project Sam's FAQ page, they should just let Kevin Sabet write it for them.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for Cultivator's Corner with Jorge Cervantes from marijuanagrowing.com. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
This is the Cannabis Minority Report, brought to you by the Minority Cannabis Business Association at minoritycannabis.org. The war on drugs has been called the new Jim Crow, or how it disproportionately polices and incarcerates people of color. As marijuana legalization proceeds, institutional barriers still prevent minorities from fully participating in the new industry. Today, we take a deeper look at these issues in the Cannabis Minority Report.
I want you all, everybody on the panel, and everybody may not be able to answer it specifically, but I want everybody to take a stab at this question of what abolition looks like. I've been fascinated by Patrisse Cullors' tweets. I'm fascinated by everything Patrisse does, but her tweets about abolition and what it looks like in real life, and her conversation in the last panel about what that meant was incredibly important to me. And I think we're at a moment in history where it might be easier for people to imagine, particularly in the era of Trump, it is easier for people to imagine the end of the world itself than to imagine a world without prisons. How do we alter our minds, our spirits, our creative output, our intellectual work, whatever it is, what do we do to begin to imagine and usher in a world that doesn't equate justice with punishment and punishment with confinement all the time? So we can start anywhere. Brian, maybe I'll start with you. And then y'all jump in as needed.
Yeah. So first, I want to thank everyone. I'm trying to get out of organizer and administrator mode, and focusing on some of the finer details of the conference. But I definitely want to thank all of you all for being here today. And after having listened to some of the panelists, I'm gonna say again, I'm gonna paraphrase the views and opinions expressed here today. Y'all really went in. I will be maybe looking for y'all for a job after today, and that's why I wanted my children to be here today too. So if I do lose it, they'll see that their daddy did it for a good reason, for a worthy cause. You know, it's interesting. I think about a lot of organizations that I've been a part of and see, and I think about their vision statement, you know, and you would hope, or at least I would, that it encapsulates some of what dreaming of this world would look like. So at the Kennedy Satcher Center for Mental Health Equity, I think I'm gonna get this right, it's to ensure equitable access for behavioral health care and opportunities to achieve optimal health. But what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
And so I started to try to think about that. And over the past few days, in different spaces, which I hope to share a little bit about over the course of the panel. But so trying to think about what that world looked like, and I often close my eyes to do it. You know, so is that a world where people at all levels of health, across the mental health spectrum, from optimal health to chronic and persistent and severe mental illness, have equitable access to culturally responsive services and resources right in the communities where they live, work, play, grow, age, worship, and learn, so that they can thrive, survive, and thrive from their families, the social supports they get from their families, friends, and community, all the way to professional services, whether that's drug therapy, counseling, and perhaps most importantly, with the freedom to choose those services and resources or not. And also, in a way, without fear, shame, guilt, and stigma.
For me, I try to, ground it in my personal commitments. And so I'm a commitment to sustainable leadership, to work in service of marginalized communities, to usher in the third Reconstruction. And the reason why I wax hard against mass incarceration, structural racism, malignant capitalism, patriarchy, and those things that animate that system is because it acts as an impediment to achieving that third Reconstruction. And so for me, when I think about envisioning what that world would look like, I look at history as my teacher. And so look at the first Reconstruction. The 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments were passed. African Americans built economic infrastructure. We created Black Wall Street in Rosewood and in Durham and in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We elected hundreds of former slaves and free Black folks to elected offices in state legislatures all across the South. And we did that from 1865 to 1877, 12 years, right? So I want you to imagine that we're now in 2030, 13 years, right? And we've won. And I'm gonna tick off a few of the things that I think would have been accomplished for us to achieve that third Reconstruction. So and I'm putting dates to it and being really specific. So from 2018 to 2020, DPA partners organized Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings all across the country to act as that moral center where directly impacted people could speak truth to power, similar to what happened in South Africa. We built, in 2022, partners helped organize people in 2/3 of the states, 30 states, to amend the 13th Amendment to finally abolish slavery for real and take out that huge exception clause. In 2024, we elected the first formerly incarcerated president of the United States, and directly impacted people were elected to office at every level of government across the country. As a result of this work, we generated the political will to create a domestic Marshall Plan, and we paid reparations for slavery and the drug war to the communities that have been disadvantaged and ravaged over the past 50 years. That happened in 2026. And finally, over this 13-year period, we dismantled capitalism and created a cooperative economy that supports the flourishing of human beings. And so that's what that new world looks like for me.
So I want y'all to continue to answer this question, but let me put it in concrete terms for folk who are imagining abolition, and they might be outsiders to the abolition. They don't know critical resistance yet. They haven't read Are Prisons Obsolete yet. This is their first conference. And they thinking, this cool. I hear everything y'all saying, but somebody stole my TV. And I really like my TV. And something got to happen because I lost my TV. And then somebody else is like, yeah, I hear y'all about resolution, and I hear you about investment in people. I'm with y'all, right? But I got this cousin. Or it's this dude on my block. And if you met this dude on my block, you might feel differently about the need for prison, right? No, but this is the conversation, right? Oftentimes the abolition conversation can become almost like a straw man if we say, well, yeah, we can invest in people who are addicts, we can invest in people who are et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then there are these moments where we have these tensions between people who the community believes need to be pulled away because they represent a danger, and our belief that the prison is not the way to do that, right? How do we respond to folk who say that their abolitionist dream is being compromised by these very real on-the-ground tensions and demands that they haven't gotten straight answers to? And I'm asking this partly to push y'all, and partly because I get, as an abolitionist myself, I get asked this question every day. What do we do with the rapist? What do we do with the child molester? How do we manage this? We're gonna get back to drugs in 1 second. I just wanna make sure, but I'm trying to establish a bigger vision for abolition that then allows us to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because when I was wondering about this question myself and asking folks in Mississippi, like, what would you do without prisons? And that's the same response that I would get from most folks who, like you said, hadn't read about prison abolition and hadn't thought about it really. And like, what do we do with people? And, you know, when I think about this question, it's interesting. It's when you think about, it's like Back to the Future. Is when you think about the future, you think about stuff that we hear about used to go on back in the day, how we would self-govern our communities and how we would take care of our own inside of our families. And so that incident that you just described, almost the exact same incident happened a couple of weeks ago at my office. One of our mayoral candidates came by and someone broke into his truck while he was there and stole his computer with all of his official business in it for the campaign, and the election is May 2nd. Yeah. So very important. So, you know, our first reaction was, okay, we have these security cameras. Let's go back and look, and let's call the police and make a report. The standard thing, you know, that we always do. And they were like, no, we're going to go out into the community and find out who has the laptop, and we're going to go find the laptop and get it back. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. That's going to be dangerous. But it wasn't. They went into the neighborhood because they knew the community. They found out who had the laptop and said, brother, we don't want any law enforcement involved. Give us the laptop back, and let's talk about some of the things that you need so you're not out here breaking in cars. And that's what happened. And that can happen. That can happen. And, you know, when we talk about the so-called dangerous folks, if we had everything that we needed in our communities, if we could go back to this cooperative way of thinking. I mean, Mississippi, when I think about Mississippi, when I think about the South, I think about land. You know, we have so much land that we don't use, that we don't make use of. And let me tell you, I'm the last person, I don't have any kind of green thumb. So, but we have so much land to use. And so if we had everything that we needed, if we were healthy, if we had all the housing that we needed, if we had all of the health care that we needed, would we get to the point where we needed these cages for so-called dangerous people? Would there be these so-called dangerous people who are a threat to society and our families? And if there was a small segment of our community that needed to be dealt with, don't we have folks in our communities that can deal with them? Yes, we do. So that is the world that I imagine. And like I said, this is a world that I've heard about, existed before in communities, hasn't been in my lifetime, but I know there's still communities like that, and I know that we can have them again.
Woo.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. Subscribe now for free at mjagenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
It's like I picked the wrong week to quit smoking.
Learn more at mjagenda.com.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Freedom Leaf Preview with Steve Bloom from Freedom Leaf Magazine. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhaled. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Today in the rant, I want to talk about what seems to be the latest talking point coming out of prohibitionists, and it has to do with one of our best talking points, and that is that marijuana is safer than alcohol. Clearly, everybody knows this, or at least vast majorities understand this. You look at some of the latest polls, and about half of America understands marijuana is safer. Another quarter say that it's no worse than alcohol, which is a real insult to marijuana. But anyway, at least they're getting there. But when it comes to the talking point, the anti-talking point seems to be developing. And it has to do with the children. Of course, we always have to worry about the damn children.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
So it was an interview where Governor Hickenlooper out of Colorado was being asked again about marijuana legalization. And, we've gotten a lot of statements out of this guy. It was a bad idea. No, it was a good idea. Oh, it's going to be bad. No, it turns out it's not so bad. He's been all over the map on this thing. But it seems to me he's gotten the bug from Kevin Sabet and the Project Sam people, because they are pushing back hard on the marijuana is safer than alcohol talking point. And the way they're doing it is by trying to say that, yeah, marijuana's a bad thing, or alcohol's a bad thing. Yeah, we don't want kids drinking alcohol. But if a kid gets drunk on the weekend, it's not going to have lifelong consequences for him. Yeah, they're trying to say basically that alcohol is more dangerous in the short term, but less dangerous in the long term as compared to marijuana. And it's absolutely ridiculous. This is evidenced by Governor Hickenlooper's latest quote, which he was on the radio. I forget which station it was, but ColoradoPolitics.com has reported on this. And here's his quote. Tom Angel got this in the Marijuana Moment newsletter. Quote, "If you're a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old and you go out and drink some beers, nobody I've talked to thinks that affects the cognitive part of your brain as it matures. The high THC marijuana we have is so intense. If you're a teenager, it will take a sliver of your memory forever." Ah, my God. All right, so how should we attack this? Should we take a look at the science first? When you look at the studies on what happens to kids, teenagers, if they regularly drink beers, if they're regularly binge drinking, you take a look at the long-term effects, you find the kind of problems that the prohibitionists keep trying to ascribe to marijuana. You find the cognitive decline. You find the problems in school, the problems in later life. We're talking about a drug that is toxic and addictive. It's called alcohol, folks. And these guys want to say, well, you know, a kid drinks a beer. It's no big deal, but boy, if he gets a hold of some of that high THC, not your father's Woodstock weed, my God, the world's going to come to an end. It just ain't so, folks. It just ain't so. We've looked at the studies that, you know, Kevin Sabet and the prohibitionists, they want to say, you know, this is, if you're a teenager, it will take a sliver of your memory forever. No, it will not. The studies show that while you're high, you got a problem with short-term memory? Sure, like, where are my keys? Why'd they come in here? What's going on? Yeah, while you're high, sure. But in the long term, when you're not high, your long-term memory, there's not a problem with it. There's definitely, and this idea that you're burning away brain cells, you're somehow permanently losing memory, is what alcohol does. Alcohol actually does that. It actually does kill teenage brain cells and hurts their developing brain. The talking point also is based on this old study from about 2012, I think it was, where they found that there was twice the likelihood of people getting into auto wrecks if they were marijuana users. That got debunked when we started looking at age and gender. And there was a study out of New Zealand that purported that kids that smoked marijuana in their teen years were then going to lose up to 6 points of IQ, 6 to 8 points of IQ, by the time they hit middle age, even if they stop smoking pot. And this is where they're hanging their hat on this. If you're a teenager, it'll take a sliver of your memory forever. No. Here's what happened. First of all, when those numbers were run, everybody loved all the prohibitionists loved this study because it had such a great number of samples involved. There's, you know, thousands and thousands involved that were tracked over a long period of time. So that's good from a scientific standpoint. Where it went wrong is the researcher that said that it was going to kill IQ didn't account for other factors like socioeconomic factors. Like people who are poor tend to end up smoking pot more often, and people that are poor also tend to be lower on the whatever scale that you're measuring. So this was backed up by a researcher, Ole Rogeberg, who 6 months later took the same data set and ran it through with let's check out some of these confounding variables, and found that the socioeconomic factors were more to blame than marijuana could be. But then a different study, this was out of King's College in London, studied twins. They studied one twin who smoked pot and one twin who did not smoke pot. And they found that, the pot smoking was associated with the decline in the IQ, but it happened for both teenagers, both the one that smoked pot and the one that didn't smoke pot. So that was insane, right? So what they're saying again is the factors that lead you to smoke pot are the same kind of factors that are going to affect intelligence. It's that those factors are leading to both, not that marijuana is leading to one or the other. So be ready for this talking point, because it's going to come up. They're going to say, we don't want the kids to drink, but if they get drunk once or twice, that's no big deal. Because that ain't true either. We'll talk more about this in Hour 2, Toker Talk Radio. But that's all the time we have on today's Marijuana Agenda. Thanks for joining us on the podcast, and check us out at mjagenda.com. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Now, streaming live on the Marijuana Agenda.
Oh, really? What are you people? On dope?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio.
Hey, this is great, man.
The voice of the Marijuana Nation.
Marijuana is listed as a Schedule 1 drug. That is absurd.
Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ. That's 650-534-2565.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Hey, man. Am I driving okay?
Toker Talk Radio is your chance to make your voice heard in the Marijuana Nation.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Snoopy Poop Dog.
Send that message with clarity that good people don't smoke marijuana.
Now let's get to Toking and Talking with your host, Russ Belville.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Hour 2 Toker Talk Radio. Thanks to all you who are hanging out on YouTube watching this live and or watching it on the replay on mjagenda.com. And I appreciate all the support and the comments and suggestions you're making as we break in this new show with this new studio. So thanks for all the help. Thanks for all the support. You can always email me, Russ at mjagenda.com, and we'll take all the comments, criticisms, suggestions, complaints, whatever you got. We're ready to hear that. Great news here at the studio is I got new business cards. Very happy to have these as we make our way to Dallas this weekend. Actually, Fort Worth, Texas this weekend. Myself, Lori Duckworth, and Coral Reefer is going to be there. So the three of us will be speaking, as well as many Texas advocates. Got the new cards. Love the new business cards. They're shimmery. Ooh. And got my picture on the back, although that's going to chroma key out. Oh, you can see through it. But anyway, heading to Fort Worth this Friday, so we won't have a live show on... Well, actually, we will have a live show on Friday. It'll just be from Texas. So I'll be coming to you from Texas. I'm not sure where from. It's Monday and Tuesday where we're going to have to figure out shows. They may be replays because I'll be in New Orleans for the first time ever. Never been to New Orleans before. I was looking on the net before this hour started, and I'm going to go a little off topic here outside of weed, because I got to talk a little bit about free speech and snowflake conservatives. If you watch the Stephen Colbert Late Show, I've been a huge fan of Stephen Colbert's, even before his Comedy Central show. I go back to his UCB days and Strangers with Candy and all that. So I love Stephen Colbert, and he went off on a rant last night about Donald Trump, and he issued one joke about Trump where he said about Trump, in fact, the only thing your mouth is good for is being Vladimir Putin's cock holster. Now, this has led now to a Fire Colbert hashtag campaign on social media. Fire Colbert, because he's homophobic. Scott Pressler tweeted, the fact that Colbert can make homophobic statements shows his privilege and systematic oppression of minority groups, hashtag Fire Colbert. Look, I maybe you got to explain this to me. I don't see how the joke is homophobic. He's not saying anything bad about gay people. He's saying something bad about Donald Trump being a supplicant to Vladimir Putin, being his, boy toy, let's say. How is this homophobic? It's sexual. It's a sexual joke, absolutely. But just because a joke is about homosexual sex, does that make it homophobic? If this were Angela Merkel we were talking about, and the situation was reversed, is that it's a sexist joke, but I guess I don't understand how the offense works here. I thought the joke was funny, but again, maybe I'm, a privileged decathlon winner, and I don't know what the hell is offensive anymore. But the idea that Stephen Colbert is homophobic is ridiculous. First of all, if you know anything about his background and his love of theater, let's say, I'm sure he's quite comfortable around gay people and cool with gay people. So I think that's ridiculous. Colbert is being silent about the issue so far. Other people are saying he needs to apologize. He needs to apologize. He was over the top. But the other side, led by George Takei, the wonderful Mr. Sulu from Star Trek, says, now the little right-wing mushrooms want to fire Colbert because he made fun of the Troll King. Wah, it'll go as well as boycott Hamilton. Folks, I'm getting a little upset at what's happening on the left, because I'm typically on the left on my politics. But I'm really upset at this. Oh, we need safe spaces. Oh, what you're saying is a trigger. I need a trigger warning. Oh, it's too much to bear. It's too offensive. Folks, freedom of speech and American freedom does not give you freedom from being offended. In fact, part of freedom, part of the side effects of freedom is that you will and should be offended. You should take offense. There should be so much free speech that something offends you, or we're not doing it right. Just recently here in Portland, we had this parade, the 82nd Avenue of Roses parade. I'd never seen it, lived here all my life. I lived here for all the 21st century is what I meant to say. But I've never seen this parade, but I know it happens. It's been a tradition in town. They canceled it this year because the Antifa, which is the far left, anti-fascist type folks, threatened to pull Republicans out of the parade. Like if they saw the Republicans in the parade, they're going to rush the parade and pull them out of the parade because they're Republicans and they therefore support Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's a fascist, and therefore they shouldn't be marching in a parade. No, man. The Nazis get to march in Skokie. That's what our free speech is all about. Our First Amendment, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. They mean nothing unless they're extended to the most reprehensible groups. Free speech and free assembly is no big deal if you're the Association of Knitting and Cat Appreciation. Nobody wants to stop you. It's the ones who have the offensive speech that we most need to stand up for. And I'm just really freaking out about this latest move on the left to want to shut down speech, shut down people like Milo Yiannopoulos or whatever his name is, and Ann Coulter and whoever else. Richard Spencer, the Nazi guy that got punched in the face. I'm against that too. I'm against punching Nazis in the face for their free speech. Sorry, I don't agree with that. And I don't agree with this idea of criminalizing speech. Folks, we have laws against criminal speech. We have laws against incitement and laws against speech that would lead to danger, that would lead to imminent danger of people, right? That's all we need. It's perfectly okay for people to speak their mind about hating a religion or hating a race or hating a sexual orientation, as long as they're just speaking about how they feel. If they start saying we need to do something about those people, yes, now we're into the territory where we need to do something about that, where we need to squelch that. But so long as it's someone expressing themselves, I am severely offended when folks on the left want to shut that down. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we got some poll numbers out of North Carolina on marijuana, some information on the godfather of grass, who we learned about from the Cornbread Mafia book, and Project Sam reacting to MPP head Rob Campia's tobacco comments.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb and licensed by the City of Portland.
It's time for cannabis facts about Alzheimer's from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A new Florida study in the journal Molecular and Cellular Neuroscience found that cannabis promotes the growth of healthy new brain tissue. It can slow the effects of Alzheimer's and may in fact be able to halt it entirely. A long-term study by Ohio State University's Professor Gary Wenk concludes that people who regularly use marijuana get Alzheimer's at a much lower rate than others. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda. Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaolin Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dogs.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for our Government at Work, the latest in cannabis reform at the local, state, federal, and international level. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Tjena, jag heter David, PKA Dirtball. Vi ska röka hela tiden, alla år.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, Toker Talk Radio on the air, 11 after the hour. It's a gorgeous day here in beautiful legal Potland, Oregon. We didn't have a spring. We went right from winter to summer. It's like 78 degrees out last when I was walking around. I had to open up the windows and air the place out. It's getting a little warm here in the studio, but man, this is the time. If you want to come visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon, this is the time to do it. Starting in May, running through about September when the rains go away for the most part. And if you're looking for a 420 friendly place to stay and a guy who knows all about what to see, you want to come out here to Delta 9 House and Studios. That's our 420 friendly Airbnb right here at Delta 9 Studios. You can actually sit right there and watch me do the show if you'd like. But most people, they make their way downtown and have a lot of Portland fun. However you want to check it out, you can book now by going to Delta9House.com. That's right, Delta9House.com. You can also find each individual room listing at the subdomains sativa.delta9house.com and indica.delta9house.com. That's Delta9House.com. We also got a couple of those weird top-level domains. I've got Delta9.house and Delta9.studio. Those new long top-level domains, kind of interesting. Check it out, Delta9House.com. Now, I wanted to give you some updates. First, an update on the... got to find the Johnny Boone story in here. I think I missed the scroll. No, don't know where that's at. All right, well, we'll find that later. The poll coming out of North Carolina, Elon University, has done a poll on the governor and the legal smoking age, and firearms on private property, climate change, craft beer distribution, and so forth. And what we find so far in this poll, do you support legalizing marijuana for medical use? And out of the voters in North Carolina, 4 out of 5 voters, 80%, support medical marijuana in the Tar Heel State. 4 out of 5, North Carolina, 80%. That's great news. But When asked, do we support legalizing marijuana for recreational use, a majority oppose marijuana legalization. 51% oppose marijuana legalization with just 45% support. There was that poll on the smoking age. I'm trying to find the number on that one, and can't find that so quickly. Let's see. Let's just do a little search, and maybe we can find that. Doesn't show. All right, well, maybe under cigarettes. Yes, there we go. On the tobacco issue, 2/3 said they support raising the minimum age to buy cigarettes and other tobacco products from 18 to 21, compared to 28% who oppose such a move. Now, I'm going to be covering this on the show, usually in hour 2, because that's when I like to put the other drugs. But as far as this push, because they've done it in Oregon, they've done it in California, I believe they've done it in Hawaii, this push to raise the smoking age from either 18 or 19, wherever it is in your state, up to age 21. Is this a good idea? Well, the first thing I would put in these laws is if you're going to raise the age to 21, which I think is generally a good idea just from the perspective of, look, if we're going to have an age, let's make it one age. But if we're not going to have just one age, because obviously we're going to keep 18 for voting and 18 for military, right? We're going to keep that because, gosh, if you don't keep the military age at 18, you can't get enough young men that want to be cannon fodder, so you got to keep that at 18. But if there's going to be a separate age for drugs than for killing people in the Middle East and voting for president, if there's going to be a separate age for the drugs, then let's make that one age too. Okay, so if alcohol's 21 and marijuana's 21, then cigarettes ought to be 21. However, when they make these laws, they need to put in a grandfather clause. This happened in Idaho when I was 19 years old. When I was 18, the drinking age in Idaho was 19. And this was when Reagan strong-armed the states into boosting the nationwide drinking age to 21. So Idaho passed this law that raised it from 19 to 21, but they put in a grandfather clause that said if you're already 19, then you're not going to lose your right to drink. So from this point on, from this birthday on, you have to be that old, and then once everyone's 21, then that age will move, right? So the 19 and 20-year-olds who were already drinking got to keep drinking for another 2 years. But the 18-year-olds who were waiting to age 19, now they had to wait to age 21. That needs to happen with these smoking laws. If you're going to raise the tobacco, and this is even more so with the tobacco than it is with the alcohol, because if you're going to raise the age of smoking from 18 to 21, you're going to have 18, 19, and 20-year-old tobacco addicts. This is with the alcohol, you might even leave that grandfather age out because, but tobacco, that's highly addictive, and these guys have serious withdrawals. So if you're going to raise that age, I want to see these bills have a grandfather clause, so if you're already 18, 19, or 20, you get to maintain your right. We shouldn't be passing laws that take people's rights away when we raise the age limit. Now, if we were a sensible society, and that's saying a lot, but if we were a sensible society, the minimum age would be 18 for all of these things. Or, my idea has always been make the minimum age 21 or your high school diploma. You get a high school diploma, boom, you're good to go. It's your life, do with it what you will. You made your commitment to get educated to the point where you're worthwhile in society, that you're worth our time, then you get the privileges of being an adult. You want to see the high school dropout rates go down? You want to tie marijuana smoking, alcohol drinking, and tobacco smoking to getting a high school diploma. I know it could never pass because it'd be painted as you're bribing the kids with weed, but still, I think responsibility-wise, if you can show that you want to be educated and be a part of society, then you deserve the privileges of society. And certainly, if we think you're capable of picking a president, God knows, look how that's turned out recently. If we think you're capable of picking a president, then we ought to allow you to have a shot after you realize what a terrible mistake you made. Smoke a bong after you see Trump win. Oh, my God. I would love to see the age be 18. Politically, it's a little untenable. It's going to be hard because you got high school seniors who can be 18 years old. And so Then you got the worry, you got people of high school age bringing that element of drugs and alcohol into the schools where they'd be around younger kids. So I understand there being a reticence to bring it down to 18. If it were my choice to make, 21 would be the age for everything. It would be 21. You'd be an adult at 21. You'd still be a kid up through age 20. Your first 2 decades are on us. Age 21, now you're an adult. And make that the age for voting, for drinking, for serving in the military, and so forth. Of course, there's also another push afoot to lower the voting age to 16. Have you heard this one? Yeah, lower the voting age to 16 to get teenagers more interested in being civic. I don't know about that one. We'll have to check that out. But what do y'all think about the age? Should there just be one age? 18, 19, 21? Hell, make it 25. I don't know. I'm older than all of those, so it wouldn't affect me none, would it? But it's happening, folks. Pay attention. We are...
You're a loony.
Well, maybe a little. That sound means that it's 4:20 here in the Pacific time zone. Time for us to make our way to our union-mandated safety meeting. I sure hope you're safe out there. We'll be right back to talk about Kevin Sabet's Project Sam attacking MPP's Rob Kampia over, tobacco. We were just talking about that.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
This is Cannabis Facts from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org, supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. In 1937, the second most prescribed medicine, marijuana, was banned. It wasn't about marijuana. The paper, oil, and chemical industries lobbied to end hemp farming. No longer labor intensive, an acre of hemp produced more quality paper than 4 acres of trees. Plastics and fibers could be produced from a plant. Hemp can even produce 10 times the energy of today's ethanol. As marijuana prohibition ends, many states now allow farmers to again grow hemp. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to process America's hemp crop at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the gay agenda, only with better music.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Marijuana Policy Insider with Marijuana Policy Project. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
I have a package here for Radical Rick. Is there a Radical Rick here? How about a Rick Russ? Any Rick Russ? Somebody named Freddie Barack has sent him a package. Anybody? What is that? Sounds like a skunk. It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everyone. 23 after the hour, and I want to talk now about Kevin Sabet. Yeah, we got to do it. So I subscribe to Kevin Sabet's Project Sam, or as I call it, Project Samuel, Smart Approaches to Marijuana Use Except Legalization. And SMART stands for Stoners Must All Receive Treatment. Well, they are the nation's leading anti-marijuana legalization group out there, and they always release a press release whenever there's some big marijuana news story, and I got the latest one from him, and I had a feeling it was on its way because I told you the story yesterday about a post in Marijuana Business Daily, MJ Biz Daily, where they spoke with the head of MPP, Rob Kampia. Rob, the executive director, the founder of MPP, was talking about how he was fundraising in Michigan to raise money for marijuana legalization there, a potential campaign in 2018, and got onto the topic of how he's negotiating or he's soliciting donations from the tobacco industry up there, from Tobacco Retailers Association, whatever it was, and how he's willing to negotiate and ask them, what is it you want to see in this? Or how could I move on this particular figure that would get you more interested in donating money, etc. It was just basically about, the nuts and bolts of fundraising politically. You got to go to this group, you got to make a concession, you got to go to that group, you got to do some horse trading, etc. So from that perspective, it wasn't that shocking. It was just, politics. This is what you do when you're fundraising. I mean, maybe from my perspective, a little shocking because I'm more of a principled advocate where, I believe that this is about our civil rights. Like the government has no right to tell me what to do with my body, what I put in my body, what I cultivate on my land, how I harvest my crops. That's not the government's business, right? So to me, there's things I couldn't negotiate away. I couldn't negotiate away home grow. I could negotiate down on it. Like I'd come in wanting 12 plants and maybe they say you can have 6. Okay, I'll come down on it. But I couldn't just negotiate it away. And we didn't in Oregon. We stuck to our guns. So thankful for Anthony Johnson being the chief petitioner who stuck to his guns and said, no, we're not negotiating home grow away. Going to have home grow. So I couldn't negotiate that away. I couldn't negotiate away our right to possess marijuana, to grow marijuana. The commercial aspects of it, sales, the commerce, I'm not as concerned with that. I still don't want to see criminality involved. I don't want to see people locked up over sales, over distribution. But to me, it's not as fundamental a right. It's really, that starts to get more into your business rights, your rights to run a business and stuff. So when Vermont, for example, proposes grow and give with no commercial, or Washington, D.C. has grow and give, I prefer a grow and give over a tax and regulate that has no home grow. I prefer a Washington, D.C. over a Washington state, right? And the reason why is, we talk about wanting to have the safe access at the dispensaries and so forth, but most of us who are regular cannabis consumers, we've got a guy, we've always had a guy, we've never been more than 1 or 2 steps away from the grow in the sales chain there. And under grow and give, that kind of system can continue to exist. Everybody's just giving, wink, to each other, right? There'd be no sales, wink, right? So anyway, I'm getting a little off the rails here because I wanted to talk about how Rob Kampia, the problem with what he said was not so much about the negotiation in politics, the sausage making that we all know goes on. It was who is helping make the sausage. And that would be Big Tobacco. And from a public relations standpoint, it really surprised me to have Kampia going off on, talking so glowingly about raising money in the tobacco industry, because just recently, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which has changed its name to Law Enforcement Action Partnership, recently they were involved in some events back east that involved some R.J. Reynolds people, I guess, tobacco people, and there was some involvement there. And it wasn't anything to the extent of, big donations or quid pro quos, but it was enough to get Project Sam and Kevin Sabet to raise holy hell. Leap was in bed and allied with tobacco, right? Because that's their number one talking point right now. That's the Project Sam, Kevin Sabet, stop legalization talking point right now. Number one is that the new marijuana industry, big marijuana, will be just like big tobacco. And this is number one talking point because big tobacco is such a, tobacco itself is such a poisonous brand now in marketing, right? You can't talk about it. Everybody got to smoke 25 feet away from a door. You can't be seen doing it. You can't do it around kids. We can't have the advertisements anywhere. It's just awful. It's a terrible thing. So if he can tie marijuana to that, that helps his gig, right? And that's always been the gig with marijuana. You always have to tie it to some other drug Because marijuana itself is not that bad and actually quite good in lots of respects. So you got to tie it to heroin, you got to tie it to crack, you got to tie it to tobacco, right? And that's what they're trying to do. So knowing that another organization's already gotten hammered on this, and knowing that this is Kevin Sabet and Project Sam's number one talking point, for Rob Campia to then just waltz right out and say, yeah, we're talking to the tobacco people, and we're taking money from the tobacco people, and we asking the tobacco people what they want to see in legalization. Now, practically it's a harmless thing, because to me, I can't possibly imagine what concession you'd make to tobacco that would make my legalization better. Right? Like, well, we only wanted to let them home grow 4 plants, but the tobacco people said you got to let them have 16 and we're out of this. I don't see that happening, right? Well, we were going to make it an ounce, but the tobacco people said it needs to be 4 ounces. So no, it ain't going to work that way. If anything is conceded to tobacco, it's going to make legalization more strict. So it's a stupid point from the Project Sam perspective as it is, because if tobacco was involved, it would be to decrease the commercialization, to tamp down the marketing of marijuana that competes with their tobacco. So that's a kind of a red herring argument that he's got going there anyway. And the other problem with this is, well, let me read the reaction. This is from Project Sam's website, entitled "Smart Approaches to Marijuana Reacts to Marijuana Lobbying Group's Admission to Soliciting Donations from Tobacco Industry." Today, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, SAM, a national organization committed to promoting evidence-based marijuana laws at the federal, state, and local levels, released the following statement in reaction to the admission by Rob Campia, the executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project, that the special interest group is actively soliciting financial contributions from the tobacco industry in exchange for shaping their marijuana legalization initiatives. Quote, Rob Campia's shameless solicitation for contributions from the tobacco industry is quid pro quo special interest politics at its worst, said Dr. Kevin Sabet, president and CEO of SAM. Marijuana laws in our country should be informed by science and evidence, not by the financial interests of the tobacco industry or a growing for-profit marijuana industry. When the head of the lobbying group responsible for every single marijuana legalization initiative in America asks tobacco companies, what do you want? It should send chills down the spine of every public health and safety official in America. This is an outrage, and we challenge the Marijuana Policy Project to immediately disclose any and all ties to the tobacco industry so that communities in Michigan and across the country considering changes to marijuana laws can see through the haze of what's really driving pro-marijuana legalization campaigns in America. End quote. So, let me give you the too long, didn't read version. It was basically... Yeah. So, but it's the kind of thing, it's like, I don't know that this broadside from Project Sam is effective in any way whatsoever. I don't know that it'll make any big difference. But my concern is, like, why even give Sam such a softball? Why lob such a softball right over the plate for them to make any splash with? Just keep tobacco and alcohol separate from the discussions here. We don't need to be raising money from the alcohol and tobacco industries. Let's stick with raising money in places that aren't going to hurt our cause, that aren't going to lead to these kinds of public relations problems. They're asking four questions, Project Sam is. How much total money has MPP taken from the tobacco industry since 95? Which state-based marijuana ballot initiatives led by MPP have been influenced by input from the tobacco industry? What specific changes to marijuana legalization or ballot initiatives have tobacco industry proposed in exchange for financial contributions? As MPP disclosed its ties to the tobacco industry with members of Congress, it is currently lobbying in support of federal legalization and so forth. Yeah, so just a bad move on Campia's part, jumping in there talking about how we're all lobbying with the tobacco industry. I mean, that's just unnecessary. Now, I'm one who thinks that the restrictions we've put on tobacco and the attack we've put on tobacco in the past few years have been overblown. And I've warned people in the past on this show and my previous shows that, first they came for the tobacco smokers, but I wasn't a tobacco smoker, so I didn't speak up. That's the way these things happen. I don't like tobacco smoking. I don't allow it in the house. I don't even smoke blunts when people wrap, with tobacco wrap. won't smoke them or let them in the house either. I don't like tobacco. But I don't like artichokes either. Well, I don't stop people from, I'm not going to pass anti-artichoke laws, right? Tobacco is a drug. As alcohol is a drug, as sugar is a drug, as caffeine is a drug, as marijuana is a drug. And we need to stand up for all of our rights to use all of these drugs. It was, who was it? Chris Christie, Krispy Kreme the other day, was talking about how, we're going to legalize marijuana just because you can buy it illegally? Well, then that just fails. Why not just legalize heroin, legalize cocaine, legalize acid, blah, 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 legalize angel dust? And you can't, like in the public sphere, when you're having that debate with him, you can't say it, but we ought to maybe. Yes, we ought to legalize all those drugs. We ought to legalize all drugs. Now, legal is a spectrum. It runs from chocolate to morphine, to quote late Peter McWilliams, I think it was. But I'm willing to put the angel dust closer to the morphine. I'm willing to put the mushrooms and the marijuana a little closer to the chocolate. But all drugs should be legal, not because we think, hey, what would be a good idea is if there's a bunch of mind-altering substances for people to have a choice from. No, because the government has no enumerated right to control what goes on past this, past here, my skin. This boundary is my sovereign territory. Even if it's a bad idea, even if it's something where we look at it and like, this could cause a little more harm in society. That's the cost of freedom, baby. And really, I have trouble accepting, we got to worry, what would happen if all drugs were legalized when we live in a country where you can buy assault weapons and you can spend 4 hours in a one-day class and be licensed to concealed carry in 30 states. I'm not worried about legal drugs.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
It's time for cannabis facts about teen drug use from Robert Platshorn's thesilvertour.org. This message is supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com. A recent survey by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control indicates that in states that have legalized medical marijuana, the rate of marijuana consumption among high school students has not increased. In fact, in legal states like Colorado, teen use has actually decreased significantly. It's simply no longer a big deal for teenagers in legal states. This was Cannabis Facts from thesilvertour.org, an educational nonprofit supported by our donors and Hemp Inc., a public company poised to lead America's hemp revolution at hempinc.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for the Northwest Cannabis Chronicle from the Marijuana Business Association. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, because they've got a town called Argosville. Arr. What are you smoking there, boy?
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
Welcome back, everyone. Well, I got to say his name. Jordan Edwards. Jordan Edwards was 15 years old, and he was murdered by a police officer of Balch Springs, Texas. He was 15 years old. He was an honor roll high school freshman. His family described him as a loving child with a humble and sharing spirit. Did not deserve to die. On Saturday night, Jordan Edwards left a party with his friends at the same time that police arrived, responding to a call about drunken teenagers walking around. One of the officers fired a rifle at the car Jordan was a passenger in, striking and killing him. His brother, who was in the car with him, watched him die before his eyes. The police chief, Jonathan Haber, tried to justify the killing and claimed the car was backing down the road in an aggressive manner toward the officers. But that was a lie. After reviewing police dashcam footage, the police chief revealed the car was actually driving away from the officers. Now, the officer violated the Balch Springs Police Department's official use of force policy, which states that officers facing an oncoming car should attempt to move out of its path if possible, instead of discharging a firearm at it or any of its occupants. But the car was moving away from him when he fired his rifle into the passenger compartment and killed the 15-year-old boy. The officer who shot and killed Jordan has been fired last night for murdering this unarmed 15-year-old. But even after he's blatantly lied to the public about the circumstances, trying to justify the killing by saying I was afraid for my life, he was going to run over me when he was driving away, the police chief in Balch Springs still refuses to bring justice to the Edwards family by arresting that former officer. The officer whose name we do not know. Yes, his identity has been protected by the Dallas County Sheriff's Department and Dallas County District Attorney's Office that are investigating the incident to determine criminal charges. This must stop. Killing these kids, killing these unarmed men. Oh, and by the way, did I fail to mention that Jordan was black? You knew that, didn't you? I didn't even have to mention it, did I? I didn't even have to bring that up. Didn't even have to mention it. You knew this kid must have been black. 15-year-old kid gunned down by cops right there in Dallas County, right where I will be. Well, I don't know, Fort Worth in Dallas County? I don't know. I'll be near there. You can bet we're going to be talking about that. Gunned down by the cops for leaving a party. How many times, I'm thinking back in my high school days when I was 15, 16, 17, how many drunken parties I was at, how many times we left as cops are being called or before cops are being called. But I doubt that would have happened to me. I doubt I'd have been shot. Folks, the cops need to understand that the mere presence of a black person is not a threat to your safety. And for this to keep happening across America, you know, Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump and these pro-cop, supporters, they want to pretend that it's just a few bad apples. Oh, it's just, the actions of one bad officer. Just one bad officer did this, and we're impugning police departments, and now their feelings are hurt, and they don't want to go out and do their jobs because they're afraid they're going to be on video, and they're going to be hassled about how they do their jobs, and it's a tough job out there, and you people don't know how tough it is, and blah 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 blah. Heard it a million times. Well, first of all, when they say that these guys are just a few bad apples, they forget the rest of that saying. A few bad apples spoils the bunch, right? It makes all the cops bad. And second of all, I refuse to believe this can keep happening all across America. I mean, it can be in North Carolina, it can be in Texas, it can be in Cleveland, Ohio, it can be in New York, Staten Island. It's happening all over the country. How the same kind of thing can keep happening. And to think this is just isolated incidences of it always just happening mostly to black people. No, it speaks to a sickness, a rot, an infection this country has had since the 1600s that we've never fully addressed, that we've never truly reconciled. Now, in South Africa, they had an apartheid system, an extreme apartheid system with a white minority ruling over a black majority. And when Mandela was elected and they had their revolution, well, not revolution, but their change there, they had truth and reconciliation congresses. They met, they had public official meetings to discuss the apartheid system and what had happened and the reparations that would be made, the changes that would be made after that. And I feel like we've never really had that discussion in America. We've never really addressed, and so much of this comes to me from attending that Not One Step Back conference there in Atlanta, listening to the wisdom of Deborah Small and others there, where we've never really addressed this. And we continue to be a country and an economy and a culture that must have a low-wage underclass. Like, we cannot function. Our style of life and economy can't seem to function without maintaining a second-class or underclass, a low-wage, low-skill underclass. We did it overtly through slavery, as low a wage as you can possibly get. We did it through child labor. We did it through, originally what were 6 and 7 day work weeks and 12 and 14, 15-hour days that people worked. When the labor movement took off in the 1900s and unions started bargaining for the 2-day weekend that we now enjoy and the 8-hour workday, which is still longer than most industrialized societies. As those things began happening, we saw Jim Crow laws, we saw ways of keeping black people down, we saw the evolution of the drug war to keep Mexican labor down, to keep poor whites down that were using it. And then later in the 60s and 70s, as was revealed by Ehrlichman, Nixon's domestic policy advisor, the war on drugs became a way to keep the left down. And what does the left always trying to do? Trying to make things better for the worker, trying to make things less profitable for management, right? So the drug war became a way of keeping that mode of thinking down to maintain that low-wage, low-skill, permanent underclass that's necessary. Now, in the 80s and 90s, we've seen that evolve into the private prison industry and the warehousing of people and the mass increase in the revolving door. Like I had mentioned in the data mining today from that new book, Locked In, where the professor describes how we only increased our prison population in that since 2000 to 2014. It only increased by 100,000 total people in prison at any one time. It's just that it was a revolving door. We had 9.6 million people going in and out of prison. Now only 100,000 extra were there at any one time because they keep going in and out. But even though they go in and out of prison, the mark on their record and the effect it has on their status, that lasts forever. That's that criminal underclass. Keep them a criminal underclass that has to check a box that keeps them in the low-wage positions when they're out of prison, and then when they're in prison, work them for 17 cents an hour for major corporations. So this has always been tied to something larger, this war on drugs, this war on marijuana. It's tied to something larger. It's tied to the entire setup of the American economy to keep a permanent, undereducated, underclass, second-class citizenship that can be relied on to provide cheap labor and to not complain. And that's what they hate about marijuana legalization. When you really get down to it, yeah, it provides a competition for pharmaceuticals, yes. Provides a competition for alcohol, sure. Provides competition for lumber and oil and paper and textiles and yada, yada, all the hemp stuff. Sure, absolutely, that's all true. But it's bigger than that. It's not so much that it's a competition for those products within this paradigm, within this system. It's something that can upset the entire system. It's something that can mess up the whole of capitalism. Now, I'm not going to go off onto a far left socialist rant. I like certain aspects of capitalism, but I believe capitalism works best when we're talking about stuff you have a choice to buy or not buy. The market's only free when you have the choice to not participate in it, right? Like, people are out there selling surfboards. I don't have to buy a surfboard. But maybe I might surf someday, and if I want to buy a surfboard, then a capitalist system, I think, is probably the best way to get me a surfboard. I think that's probably the best way surfboards are going to be made, or whatever else. But heart surgery? No. I can't really decide if I want to have heart surgery or not. I can't really decide to shop around for heart surgery so well, especially, you're in the middle of a myocardial infarction, right? So there's where I don't think capitalism works so well. Works pretty good for stuff you don't need, works lousy for stuff you do need, and it's cruel and unusual punishment for stuff that involves human suffering, human misery. Private prisons, private healthcare is absurd as private police and private fire department. We'd never do that, right? I always like to bring that up, like private fire department, because they used to be private. Fire departments used to be private. They used to be, you had to have a medallion that showed that you donated to the local fire department, and if that medallion was on your house was on fire, the fire department would come and put it out. But if that medallion is not on your house, tough shit, your house burns down. After a while, people recognized that, wait a minute, letting Bob's house burn down sometimes leads to my house catching fire. And maybe if we just put everybody's fires out, if we had like a taxpayer-supported socialist system that put any fire out, whether you're poor or rich, would put out a fire in the slum or put out a fire in the mansion, that would be better for society overall. And nobody freaks out about that. Nobody freaks out about that socialism. That's not a problem for anybody, but God forbid we help people stay healthy. Oh!
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
Hey, this is Willie Nelson for Normal. And I smoke pot and I like it a lot. I learned a long time ago that marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol. There's nothing wrong with the responsible use of marijuana by adults. It's time we stopped arresting and started respecting those who smoke marijuana responsibly. To learn what you can do to help, contact NORML at NORML.org or call toll-free 888-67-NORMAL.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the alcohol agenda. But a lot safer.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for Police for Reform with Law Enforcement Action Partnership. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Pod 2.0.
It's not your father's Woodstock weed.
It's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation. Call in now at 650-LEGAL-MJ.
All right, welcome back, everybody. And looking out at the chat room, John Thomas notes that paramedics used to be part of the fire department. Now they're for profit. Big time. Or as our president would say, bigly. I wonder how many people have died trying to drive themselves to the emergency room because they couldn't afford an ambulance. You know, I had to take an ambulance ride. 4 or 5 years ago, I had a kidney stone, knocked me to the floor, put me in the fetal position. Oh my God, I just puking and I thought I was going to die, really. I'd never experienced pain like that. That was something. That was amazing. And I had to call an ambulance because my wife was out of town or at work or somewhere. I can't remember, my ex-wife now. Just me and my dog. Dog was licking me like, dude, what's up? He was freaking out too. So I had to call an ambulance, and they took me, and it wasn't that far a drive. Like, I lived off of 80th Avenue, and the hospital's at 49th Avenue, down the same street, right down Gleason Street in Portland. And that bill was like $500-$600, was it? I can't even remember what it was, just for that little ride. And so this leads me to the point that drivers for Uber and Lyft are increasingly finding themselves picking up extremely sick people to get to the hospital. Wow. That, it's we're almost to a point where we might see a Lyft style or an Uber style ambulance service. I like this gig economy stuff. I don't like Uber so much. They're kind of corporate evil, but I like Lyft. And I like Airbnb, obviously. And I like that we are taking the middleman. Like, technology is helping us take the middleman out of some of these transactions, some of these things that we do. And I would like to see that happen with ambulances. Wouldn't that be cool? If a person, now, I'm not just saying anybody should be able to be Lyft ambulance or whatever we're going to call it. But if you get certification, right? You get yourself whatever it is you need to be an EMT. Wouldn't it be cool to see EMTs like forming their own Lyft style, hospital transportation stuff? And it wouldn't have to be limited to emergencies. These guys could do, for the sick people that are in wheelchairs or otherwise, have mobility issues, to get them to their doctor appointments or, wherever else, shopping perhaps, I don't know, but there's got to be some sort of answer, because this is ridiculous. I mean, well, the answer, of course, is our government taking care of our healthcare. People in Canada don't worry about calling the ambulance. People in France don't worry about calling the ambulance. Only here in America, and it's fun talking to foreigners, because I get some foreigners come through here in the Airbnb sometimes, and I talk to them about their healthcare systems. I talked to the one lady here from Germany, and she had complaints about German healthcare, like I have complaints about marijuana. Oh gosh, this big full jar of marijuana, oh my gosh, it's a little dry. It's only 18% THC, right? Like, yeah, I got my complaints, but these ain't Idaho complaints. These are like first world complaints. And that's like what's going on, people in Germany, Canada, France, whatever. You can get them to complain about their system. Britain, sure, right? You can get them to complain about their system, because every system has flaws and problems and things you can complain about. But these are little tiny complaints compared to, I'm about to die. Can I afford to call an ambulance? I just got cancer. I guess I'll be in 6 figures of debt for the rest of my life. That doesn't happen in these other countries. But America, we have been pulled away since 1980, since Reagan. We have been pulled away from our idea of community. We've been fooled into thinking community means communism. We've been fooled into this thought that somehow community is the opposite of freedom. When in fact, community is what upholds freedom. It's the very nature of freedom. We couldn't have the freedom we have without the community of states and the nation that defends it and fought for it. But since Reagan and since the rich have plundered our system, it's all been, you're on your own. It's all been yo-yo. That everybody's for themselves. And by gosh, if we all are freed from our commitments to the community, then we're all free to get rich. We're all free to become millionaires. When, of course, we know that not all of us will become millionaires, nor would that be possible. So to fulfill this lottery thinking dream of, hey, if we free ourselves from regulation and commitment to community, we can hit the lottery and become multimillionaires, works out great for the multimillionaires, not so good for the people with the losing lottery tickets. Sorry I went a little afield from marijuana, but you know how I think. All this stuff's tied together, folks. That's all the time we got for today. Time flies when you legalize. Thanks for joining us. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and SoundCloud. And follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it.